Thank you all for being here at Oshkosh 2021. I can speak for all the AOPA staff and say we missed you last year big time. So, beautiful week. Thanks for the weather getting cooled down a little bit, and it's supposed to be a high of 72 today and beautiful. So, really appreciate y'all coming. We're going to give a little bit of an ASN program update, and then hear from some of the regional managers, and then we're going to hear from Mark Baker, our president. So enjoy the coffee and donuts. By all means, get up and grab another one, please. They're paid for. We're going to give a few issue updates, and then tell you about what's coming for the ASN program next year. Right after today's event, like immediately when you get up and leave, we're going to go out that way, and we're going to have a class photo. So all of us here, wives included, husbands included, guests of ASNs included, we're going to have a class photo by going out that door, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. The program for ASN has been growing steadily for about 4 years now, and it's a huge part of our airport advocacy, so I thank you all for that work. Next year's our 25th anniversary of the ASN program. Started in 1997, and our growth trajectory has been pretty steep. It's been good. But we're kind of setting a stretch goal to have 2,500 ASNs by the 25th. So end of 2022, I want 600 more. I think we're going to get to the 2,200 point this year, and I think we can do it next year. So our big picture is to grow the network, expand the ranks, add people to what you're doing around all over the country, and have that network help us fight and defend airports, because it's the critical part of our freedom to fly. So you can't go far without a runway. And all right, so introductions real quick. I've got Josh Pruzek with me, the regional manager from the Northwest Mountain region, and Kyle Lewis from the Great Lakes region. And we've got a couple folks in the back, Murray Hewling and Chris Cooper are with us from the Regulatory Affairs branch in DC. We're all in the DC office. These guys are remote. Got Jim Kuhn with us, Tom Haynes, and Eric Blinderman in the back. So, okay, first thing I'm going to start with is introducing Kyle for this chart, because that's yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. I echo what Mike said. Appreciate the staff that's in the back. I can guarantee you that we can't do our jobs without the rest of the AOPA staff, from the DC folks, communications, outreach and events, everybody. So it's definitely teamwork to make this happen, but also our jobs and what you guys do at your local airports. So this is a big deal this week. Who here has an experimental aircraft? I do too. What about primary? Anybody here with a primary or limited category? So we got a couple folks. So this affects you. It affects me with flight training. So it all stemmed from a lawsuit down in Florida and a court ruling, and
that's standard category.
Yeah, that's definitely a standard category. Anyway, so it affects a very broad group of people in aviation. Experimentals are, one of the fastest growing segments. But this is it's not a safety issue at all. This is an exercise in paperwork. There's levels at the FAA that don't like it, and I'm sure Mark's going to hit on this as well in a little bit. But it's an exercise in paperwork. It's unnecessary, and we have a fix at the legislative level. So I think you picked up the call to action sheets. If you didn't get one, they're back on the white table at the exit. We want you to call your congressman, your state senators on these two House bills, 4645 and 2458. There's talking points right on there. I won't get into it. Mark's going to touch on this in a little bit, but very important that you take the time to look into this and read into it, especially if you're affected by it. But it's creating a safety issue rather than trying to fix something. It doesn't fix anything at all, other than wasting a lot of time. So go on to the next one. Go back to Mike.
Okay, so the ask there is to call your U.S. congressman, not your state congressman. U.S. congressman, U.S. senator, ask them to co-sponsor the bill and tell them you're a pilot in their state or their district and you want them to support this. Okay, I have the huge honor of leading the AOPA regional managers. We have 7 deployed around the country. They live in their regions. I mentioned 2 here today. That's a quick snapshot of who we have. Everybody out here who's an ASN volunteer is probably getting a monthly newsletter from the regional manager in that area. So if you don't have time to take a picture of this is on the website. You can get any one of us, ask your regional manager for this if you want it. You can get me too. So it's a great team, and let me tell you, we crank out a lot of product in the form of airport advocacy and state advocacy. So this team spends the first 6 months of its year doing state lobbying. And we had a good year this year. We had about 12 bills we got passed, and most of them were fiscal notes. Most of them had a money impact to save members money or right-size a state's aviation budget. And we blocked about 6 bills that were really bad for general aviation. And if you haven't heard about it, one of them, the biggest one, was a $1,000 landing fee in Massachusetts to offset climate mitigation. So that was dead on arrival for about 10 reasons. It was never going to fly. The guy wanted to start a conversation, and Sean Collins, up there in the top right corner of the map, got a hold of the guy's chief of staff and said, okay, let's have the conversation. How about withdraw the bill, kill it, because it's not going anywhere. It's just ridiculous. And then the conversation started, and we told him why. And it was a great opportunity to tell every person in the state of Massachusetts, in aviation or not, the incredible value of general aviation. The jobs, the economic impact, the number of employees, and just in tax base. It's incredible what aviation does for Massachusetts. And they have just a couple of Part 139 airports. Logan is the big one. It's all GA airports. So it was very quick study for this senator, Julian Sear, to hear from many of our members, 5,200 members. We told them all, call the senator, and we gave him his number. So a couple hundred called him, 300 or 400 called him, and it was a big movement of the needle. He heard from his own constituents, he heard from people in the state that he doesn't directly represent, and it really helped. And that's the message of advocacy. When we I used to own one of those, so I always stand in reverence. Anyway, advocacy is all about our members speaking with one voice, and let me tell you, it works. So, okay, so I'll tell you about our airport advocacy work, which is a 12-month-a-year job. We have 7 regional managers. We have 2 airport experts that work with us back in the DC office, and we are really busy, is the answer. Since January 1st of 2020, we've closed 219 airport cases, anything from a lease issue to a direct closure threat or incompatible land use. We have 111 open cases today. That number changes every day in our database. It's live. As soon as the regional managers get an issue from the ASN or from somebody else, we open a case. We take the case for annual inspection. Sometimes it's a deep annual inspection. We learn about all the details, much more than what the initial complaint was. And we have a very iterative process where we learn everything about the airport. Funding, is the airport manager trained? Is the local politicians happy with the airport or opposed to it? Are the local community upset or happy with the airport? How many jobs? What's the economic impact? Once we know what the annual inspection looks like, then we start putting pressure on the places where we know it can be effective. And with 219 cases closed, we're getting better and better at this all the time, which is pretty cool. And by the way, we've been doing this job for decades. I'm not sure we ever tracked it like this, but now we know where the pressure points are. If you look at the bottom right corner of that screen, you don't have to read the numbers, but the longest bar there is since January 2020, we've closed over 80 rules, regulations, and minimum standards issues. That's our #1 issue that we track, and it's an administrative deal, but members call us and say, the new airport manager is going to rewrite the rules and regulations, and it's going to change how hangars are rented, or it's going to change how the waiting list is handled, or maybe they're going to try to deny independent CFIs from access to the airport. So we help with those, and our #1 method of fighting those, or helping the airport manager get to the right decision, is get the pilots together. We do that with the help of the ASN volunteer. Create a little support group, doesn't have to be official, get them speaking with one voice, and make sure the airport manager's listening. When those 2 groups are talking, success usually happens. You know, it's part of our democratic principles, right? Consent to the governed. So the airport advocacy work is busy. You all are critical to that. So if you're not the one that gives the issue to us, you're the first call we're going to make once we get an issue at your airport. We're going to get you involved, and it's good stuff. It's a lot of fun to be a part of a successful resolution. By the way, we don't win them all, but we're victorious a vast majority of the time. Okay. We've been growing the ASN network for about 4 years now, and we're 500. We've gained 500. We started in January of 2019, and we had 1,425. Today we're at 1,906. That number changes every day. It's amazing. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. Members sometimes quit. But we are on the eve right now of, since we're out of legislative season, we're doing a big push to recruit the end of the year. If you have local airports that you're familiar with, maybe you fly to all the time, ask if there's an ASN there. Try to figure out who it is, or look on the ASN website. It'll tell you who it is. And if you know somebody, tell them to nominate themselves. We are hiring, and the pay is non-existent. Okay. Okay, back to you, Kyle.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about a couple big issues among the aviation world. Ramp and FBO transparency. You know, we've been talking about this for a couple years. We've created some avenues for ramp and FBO transparency, the fees. The AOPA Airport Directory online, it's gone through some major changes recently. There's a Yelp feature that now where pilots can leave reviews. So log in under your AOPA membership login. If you have a good experience at an FBO, leave a review. If you have a bad experience, leave a review. We're also asking FBOs, airport managers, to update their fees online. That way it's literally 2 clicks away on your iPad to be able to find out what these prices are. We're working closely with a lot of the top chain FBOs on getting all their fees online. A number of them have been very good about what the little airplanes are, you know, the fees, the overnight fees, landing fees, security fees, things like that. Working with to get the other aircraft, the turboprops, the jets, that way they're full disclosure. And Mike's been involved with that along with Mark and Mr. Kuhn in the back. Another issue is alternative ramp areas. And this is something we actually have some not photos, but a couple of charts showing how this works next. But what are these alternative areas? They're not necessarily free in all cases, but they're outside of an FBO. Maybe they're controlled by the airport. You're able to park in an area off to the side that has tie downs or overnight parking, and it's $10 for the week or $10 for the night. And you still have access to and from the land and air sides. So let's take a look at that. Ramp transparency right there on our website. Lots of resources on this. There's a lot of resources. We're going to talk about some of the terminology, standard terminology that AOPA is supporting along with the other associations. The website for this is down at the bottom, aopa.org, advocacy, know before you go. It's a top line item on our website. The ask here, go talk to your airport manager. If you're at an airport with an airport diagram, these are generally towered airports with commercial service. You have an airport diagram. There's 760, give or take, 760 airports with an airport diagram. This is very important because in the near future, coming up, the FAA is going to start pushing diagrams at all airports. With the new technology and mapping, they're going to be able to diagram all airports with an instrument approach. So it's very important that we get to some standard terminology, which we're going to talk about now. So the top left box, you'll see a lot of terms in there. GA apron, GA itinerant parking. Maybe it just says GA. These are all terms, and this is just in Southern California. Nearly 30 different terms to identify general aviation parking areas. Pilots are pretty good at remembering things, but when you throw 30 different terms at us to where we're supposed to park or where we can park, we might forget and go to the wrong place. I've been guilty of going to the wrong area of an airport and finding out there's nothing there just because it was labeled wrong or not labeled at all. So AOPA, along with all the other top-line associations, including AAAE, which is the American Association of Airport Executives, so the airport manager folks, have come up with these 3 standard terms. GA transient ramp, which is just what it sounds. It's an area that's available to park for general aviation. It could be outside of an FBO. It might not be free. There could be fees associated with it. Then we have FBO ramp, which is exactly what it sounds. It's a commercial operator that sells fuel, provides other services, and sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to go to an FBO for certain services. And then we also want to identify the GA tenant parking areas, which would be the permanent parking areas on an airport. They could be tie downs, they could be the shaded hangar areas, just so they're identified That way, when we're talking to the control tower, they ask us where we want to go, we have that ability to be more informed, and the airport's more transparent on it. So this has been a big push for us. We've been contacting airports across the United States. I know I've reached out to a lot of my ASNs and been very helpful at a number of them on this charting update on the diagrams. It's also very important because now with iPads and ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, and on down the list, when you land, a lot of those switch automatically to the airport diagram. And it's right there in your face looking at it. You know, it's not a piece of paper anymore that you kind of review and then throw in the back seat. So it's very important that these terms are standardized, and that's what we're really pushing. Here's a bad charting example, as you can see by the sad face. I've removed the airport name to protect the innocent. However, some of you may recognize it. It's a pretty popular airport in the great state of Ohio. So a couple issues with this, and I'll just go through them. There's actually GA transient parking available at that administration terminal. It's kind of local knowledge sort of thing. There used to be a restaurant there that you could taxi up. No charges to park. You can park there all day and go to a ball game or have a nice walk downtown. There's also a kind of an incorrect labeled FBO, which just says FBO. It's down there on the south side of that long line of hangars. It's more of a service center for large corporate jets. Even though it's labeled FBO, you can't taxi in there and get gas, 100 low lead for your airplane. Down there, the gray area at the far south of the chart, there's no ID on that one. And that's actually a second FBO that has very competitively priced parking areas and self-serve fuel. That's very competitively priced at this airport. But it's not even labeled on the chart. So there's definitely some issues with this diagram. And we'll switch over to the really good diagram. This is St. Paul Downtown Airport. Very early on in this process, they agreed to update to the standard terminology, as they are also working on the other MAC airports that have diagrams. They're doing some construction projects and taxiway realignments, so when all that work is done, they're going to update their diagram to reflect our terminology. But in the green circles, you see 2 FBO ramps, and up at the administration and customs area, they also have a nice restaurant at that airport. There is access to and from, and they've labeled that as a GA transient parking. So very, very good working with the MAC on this. They've been very supportive going forward. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this real quick. So it's about 700, as Kyle said, airports with diagrams. In a few years, the FAA's taken it to 3,000. We're doing this because it's not a standardized thing in the FAA, and just about everything in the FAA is standardized. I mean, we live by that. So we think pilots deserve to know where they can park, and labels ought to be standardized on these diagrams. And that's a pretty simple ask, we thought. We actually came up with an industry agreement on what the terms ought to be, and we're pushing it. We're pushing it from the pilot's perspective. Over the last 8 or 9 months, we've contacted over 100 airports directly with the regional managers. To date, we have 40 that have already made the change. They're already published. It's about a 15-minute process for an airport manager or an ops manager to get into the NFDC database and make the change. The charting folks at the FAA said, we'll take a printout of the current diagram with a pen and ink change submitted with this, and upload it. It's so simple, it's terrible. It does not go through engineering changes. It's a simple process. And we're trying to get the GA community, starting with all of you, to help push this if your airport has a diagram. If your airport has a sketch, don't bother pushing this because it's physically impossible to add these labels to a sketch. But like Kyle said, they're growing to 3,000 or so, and you're going to see more and more of these flowing into the EFBs in the cockpit. So the ask there is, if you have a diagram at your airport, have a chat with your regional or with your airport manager, and ask them to, have you heard about the ramp transparency ramp diagram effort that AOPA is pushing? They probably have, but if they haven't, tell them that, connect them with the regional manager, or tell them that know before you go website and say it's 3 simple terms, and that's what we're asking for. So we win lots of battles with one message, many voices. This is the message, and you're the voices. So help us with that, if you would, please. Go ahead.
Actually, you're still up with the Hangar survey.
Okay, still me. So how many here completed the 7-question hangar survey that we sent out? Outstanding. There you go. Okay, so we're looking for 100% on that. We have 1,900 ASNs, and we're trying to fix a national problem by first quantifying and getting some data on the problem. How many people think there's a hangar shortage around this country? Exactly, yeah. We all believe that. I've been on a waiting list for a while. We've heard some crazy examples of 15 years. Dave Toulis was on a waiting list for 15 years down in Atlanta. And there's some really crazy examples. And we started the survey with all the ASNs. We're going to keep that survey going until we get really close to 100% of the ASNs. 1,900 airports would give us strong data. We're also doing statewide surveys with the help of the state aviation directors and the statewide airport management associations. I want to recognize John Minninger up here. He's with the state of Pennsylvania. He's on the Governor's Airport Advisory Council, and he's also the chairman of the board of Bucks County. So appreciate you being here, John. And is there our ASN? Great person to be the ASN. But he's helping us with his team. We did a statewide survey of all 116 public use airports. We got some incredible data, and now we're actually working with that team to see if there's any statewide fixes. Our mission is to get many states done with this survey. We do the survey work, we do the data analysis. All we need is the email address and the logos from the partners, and it's working pretty well. We're just getting ready to launch California, the most populous member state we have, and 4 other states are in the conversation phase. But here's the emerging results, and it kind of confirms what we all know. 71% of airports have a waiting list. Now, there's a caveat. Not all waiting lists are created the same. We know that. Some airports have a black market culture with the waiting list, or with the people will be on the list for 3 years, but 5 or 6 airplanes have come or gone. So that's probably not something we can help with unless it's one of many other problems, and then we might be able to help. But that's not a compliance problem until there's fraudulent stuff going on, and sometimes that happens. But we know there's a hangar demand signal in this country. It's not at every airport, but it's at a lot of them. We also know that the waiting time is pretty staggering. The left chart in the bottom shows that about 30%, a little less than 30% wait up to 6 months. And when you add up the rest of them, they're waiting 6 months to more than 2 years. And in some crazy examples, it's a decade, which means it's not a functional waiting list, right? It's probably not. So we know there's a demand signal, we know there's a long wait, and we asked the airport managers at the state level and with your survey, what's the #1 reason why you don't build a hangar? And this is airports with land, with a demand signal, and the answer is funding, which doesn't surprise any of us. It's either lack of state funding or lack of a state program, like a revolving loan program for hangars. And everybody knows that AIP funding is eligible for hangars, but to get the priority level for your project high enough, you have to have everything else perfectly squared away at your airport. So it's really not a typical funding stream to get AIP dollars for GA hangars. So we're working on that. We're going to get the data first. We're going to work on some solutions at the national level. We're always working solutions at the state level. Minnesota's got a great program with a revolving loan for GA hangars, and a lot of airports benefit from that. So we're sharing those best practices with all of the state aviation directors. We meet with them every year, or the whole team does. And we're trying to get everybody tuned into what's working in other states. And this is a big one. I don't know if it's an existential threat to GA yet, but in time, airplanes sitting on tie downs where the owner wants a hangar is going to beat those airplanes up, and it's going to age the fleet faster, and we don't need that. So if you haven't done the hangar survey, I won't call you out, please go online and do it. It's on our ASN website. It's on every newsletter you're getting. I would ask you to take the survey. If you've already taken it, don't do it again. But thank you for that. All right. And it's now, we'll hear from the regional managers in a minute, but it's an honor to introduce Mark Baker, our president.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Most importantly, I think I agree with Mike. I think we should double your pay.
Yes.
You guys are doing a great job, and it really matters in aviation and for volunteering and helping out, being the eyes and ears for these airports. I missed all of you last year, and it's been way too long since we've been get together and share this thing we call general aviation. Let me give you a couple of views of what I see going on in the country today, and even in the crazy palace and that other part of the world called D.C. there's a lot of really good things going on in GA. Who would have thought a year ago or 15 months ago, general aviation be one of the things that really boomed on the backside of the COVID thing, and it's been unbelievable to see what's happening with airplane prices. Used prices are going right through the roof. The number of new pilot's licenses that are being flight schools that are doing booming business. Every one of the OEMs here that I talk to are sold out really through all of next year. New airplanes. The only way we get used airplanes like I buy is to get people to buy new airplanes. And new airplanes are selling like crazy. I have not seen this much activity in terms of growth in number of pilots since 1980, and I've been flying since 1977. We peaked out around 800,000 pilots with some World War II guys hanging in there in 1980. We can, on a 40-year kind of decline, down to 570,000 pilots as measured by some type of medical. And thanks, where's Jim Kuhn? Wave your hand, Jim. Anybody heard the basic med here? Anybody heard of it? Yeah, okay. Well, thank Jim Kuhn for that and the team in DC for getting that done, because 5 years ago that became the law of the land, and there's 66,000 people flying under basic med now in the country. And our pilots numbers now between that, new people coming into aviation, unbelievable careers in aviation. We're back over 670,000 active pilots for the very first time in 30 or 40 years. So give yourself a round of applause for celebrating aviation. It is really booming, and a lot of things are going good, and this LOTA thing that you talked about is one of the, talk about the inmates running the asylum in D.C. The lawyers in FAA decided all of a sudden we needed to have a LOTA to fly and get training in our aircraft. And we went crazy, as did the rest of the associations, and said, we're going to go fight this. We've already got the bills dropped, which is unbelievable. But it's because of you and friends like you that we get a voice in D.C. But they actually responded, and within 10 days, we have a bill number in the House and the Senate that we were going to go pursue and get this law changed if we have to, because the FAA can't run themselves correctly. And making sure that we understand that flight training is not compensation for hire. We want to make sure that people get trained, spend more time training, because we've just come through the safest year general aviation's ever had. Why would we take one step backward and do less flight training and make this bureaucratic, I'm not going to say it, paperwork get in the way of doing the right thing? So with this team and what you're seeing here today in terms of their surveys and these tracking these issues is something that, I don't think we had done as good a job as we should have. A number of years ago, Jim and the team really started reactivating you and friends like you to get this thing done, because we want to make sure we protect this thing called the freedom to fly. And celebrating 82 years of AOPA's history is because of this, involving the community, figuring out how to get these legislators or these Congress people to listen to you and the needs of general aviation, because we employ 1.2 million people are employed in general aviation. A $250 billion impact to GDP. We're big, we're real, and we're here to stay. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you. Thank you, boss. So we're going to hear from Josh Prusick and Kyle Lewis just for a quick update in the regions. And the big issues are what we talked about, but it's really great to have Josh here. I think, how many years consecutive at Oshkosh?
I think this is my 42nd Oshkosh.
And you're like 43.
Yeah,
I will say that
I'm a young-looking 47 years old.
Yeah.
So came when I was 5 years old.
Josh shared a picture of his dad's camper on June 25th or whatever the day the shoulder opened. So he's a zealot, and he's one of our great new hires. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that I actually did come last year. I was actually planning on taking that week off for vacation anyway, so I happened to be in Wisconsin. I thought opening day, what better use of the time than to fly down and see what's happening at Oshkosh, and it was a pretty sad sight, but glad to see this year. This is fantastic, and it feels like home. In the Northwest Mountain region, there's a couple of major themes that are going on, and they center around the two large population centers in the Northwest region. In the Puget Sound area, it's really a threat of pushing general aviation out around the heart of the Puget Sound. We have a tremendous fabric of general aviation in that community. There's a lot of seaplane activity. There's a lot of Boeing influence that trickles down. It's a great general aviation part of the state. But the airports in and around the Seattle area are all in the process of expanding and growing beyond their britches, and they're starting to push general aviation out. And so we're starting to see that at some of the major metropolitan airports in the area, which include Boeing Field, Renton Field, and Payne Field, which are the three big airports in and around the Seattle area. Those three airports, I think, host over 1,000 general aviation tie-down and hangar tenants combined. We have several thousand members that call each of those airports their home airport, whether they're an aircraft owner that base their aircraft there, or whether they fly at a flight school or part of a flying club there. So it's a real critical area for us to focus on. Every one of those airports that I mentioned has a major Boeing manufacturing component to it. Two of those three airports have commercial service into them, and two of those airports are in the process of just finishing up master plans, and one is just getting started on a master plan. And at Renton and Boeing Field, we saw the writing on the wall in the master plan, which looked like they were going to push out hangars and tie-downs in way for cargo and expanded commercial operations and other things that didn't look like they would really serve the general aviation community. And of course, without general aviation, there is no cargo and there is no commercial operations. And so we worked with two local groups that we helped stand up at the two airports there. One is the Friends of Renton Airport, one is the Friends of Boeing Field. Two fantastic organizations that really catalyzed the local pilot population and helped to energize that message that Mike talks about. It's one message, many voices. And at both Renton and Boeing Field, we were able to effect some change. And at least at this point right now, we're going to be able to keep the same number of tie-downs and hangar spaces that currently exist at those airports. We're going to keep the pedal down at Payne Field as they start on their master plan and work to make sure that general aviation has a strong voice at the table so that we don't continue to see general aviation being pushed to the fringes and eventually pushed out of those important airports for us. The second major area is in the Denver area. The Front Range of Colorado is a very popular general aviation area, particularly for flight training. And it creates a bit of a perfect storm when you look at the Rocky Mountains to the west and the Denver Class B to the east. South of Denver, you have Colorado Springs and the Air Force Academy and a number of different training areas for the Air Force. And to the north of Denver, there is a hotbed of flight training and general aviation activity, as well as a tremendous influx in population and residential housing development and population sprawl and urban development. And so we are fighting a hornet's nest of noise complaints in and around the Rocky Mountain Metro Airport, the Boulder Airport, the Erie Airport, the Longmont Airport. There are some very energized, very politically savvy groups that are aligned and motivated to try and curtail and really throttle those airports. They are so well connected that they have been able to reach out and enact some federal legislation that was introduced in late 2019. Fortunately, that legislation did not go anywhere, but we are keeping our finger on the pulse of where that is at. We're working with a couple of great ASNs at those airports. Several of them are here. We're working to stand up a strong community airport organization at the Rocky Mountain Metro Airport to provide a voice for the general aviation community there. And we think we can affect some change, but it's going to be a long fight, and it's going to be a fight that I'm personally committed to, and we're committed to supporting that effort there. So it's good to see so many of you here, and I'll let Kyle talk a little bit about his region.
And before he does that, I want to recognize one of our ASN Board of Advisor members is from the Northwest Mountain region, Keith Sirks. If you'd stand up, please. Where are you? There he is in the back. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. It's great. We have one Board of Advisor for the ASN Board for each one of the regions, and it's great to have that team aboard. They help keep us straight on how you're thinking, what's the right thing to ask, how to ask it, and everything else. So thanks, Keith. All right, Kyle.
All right. So some good news, no more jails at a county airport. That issue resolved itself. I don't know if a couple of years ago you heard me tell the story about the jail that was actually at an airport. But anyway, so a lot of big issues across the Midwest, Great Lakes region. In Ohio at Claremont County, Sporty's Pilot Shop, they're being threatened by some housing developments being built right near the runway protection zones. There's a Warbird operator there, Tri-State Warbird Museum that they have a Mustang B-25 and a lot of other aircraft. They're looking to expand their runway, maybe some more private jet operations, things like that. And the housing developments would be not necessarily a threat to the airport, operationally, but the noise complaints that could stem from them. We all know noise complaints are always a symptom of another problem, and that's because poor zoning, poor land use planning, things like that. That's an issue we're fighting across the country. It's one of our top issues that we're dealing with. Also, Indy Executive Airport, Indianapolis, same sort of issue, a runway extension, and a proposed housing development that would butt up right against the runway protection zone. So we're fighting those two issues. Great support at the airports helping us with that. Open lines of communication, very important. And also very receptive county planning commissions and county commissions and city commissions like that. It's always an education factor because people see the airplanes flying around like, well, they really don't bother us. We kind of like them. But when you live there 365, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not that the airport's a bad neighbor, but that people just aren't educated about what they're getting into. And the developers don't understand it most of the time. So we're working really hard to make sure that all the bases are covered in these. And that the airport sponsor and the developer are doing the right things when it comes to the FAA and following Part 77 and the 7460 in tall structures to make sure there's no obstructions that will be created by these housing developments. So that's one of the issues we're working. Also, on the state legislative front in Ohio, rewriting their tall structure permitting process that's very outdated. The last rendition was in the early 90s, and it needs updated to bring it up to current FAA terminology. So that's something we've actually been fighting in Ohio for almost 4 years, working with our partners at the Ohio Aviation Association and a couple of friendly House members that are trying to get this done for us. It didn't happen in the state budget this year, but we're looking to introduce a standalone bill at the state level this fall that we have some good support on, and also working with a wind turbine company in Ohio that had some issues with the permitting process. So working through all that. Across the region, a lot of hangar lease issues. Every day, I get emails about, hey, our hangar rates are going up. They're going to require this, they're going to require that. Insurance on hangars. Land leases for private hangar development, the reversionary clauses. These are questions we get all the time, and it's in every state in my region that we get these. Give us a call. We're happy to take a look at these leases, point you in the right direction. Sometimes it requires a little bit more in-depth look from our legal side, but we can definitely take some notes on it, let you know if it's kind of in compliance or if it's out of industry standard. One of the more recent ones with hangar leases, in 2017, the FAA put out a new hangar use policy that's in the airport compliance manual. Some airport managers aren't quite aware of what's in there, but you can now build an airplane in a hangar at a public use airport. That was something that the FAA not necessarily frowned upon, but they just didn't have a policy on, and that's all been clarified. So give us a call. We're more than happy to talk to you about all that. There's a lot in there. And even with your airport manager, if they don't understand it, we're happy to talk to them about it. Some other issues is just infrastructure development at airports. I was out in Spearfish, South Dakota just about a month and a half ago, and that entire city is seeing a population influx. And there's some operators that want to base there, but there's no hangars. So we're trying to educate the city and also support at the state level for some funding, again, with the hangar work we're doing, to provide some funds for taxiway alleys and ramp areas so they can lease out some land and get that private investment on the airport. Very good event that our ASN, Ray Gillick, put together. And I went out and we had a really nice turnout. Four state Senate members were there and one House of Representative member from the state of South Dakota. All very positive. We're looking for some good things there at Spearfish. So, but bottom line is, give us a call, no matter how big the issue is, how small it is. These small issues can turn into big things overnight, and we try to stay ahead of those and help you guys stay ahead of those and give you the resources you need. So, thank you very much.
All right. I think we're at the, yes. Okay, so think about some questions. We're going to take a few minutes of Q&A, and then we're going to have our class photo here. Just to summarize, we asked for 4 things today. We asked you to call your senator or your congressman and support our call to action. Ask them to join it, ask them to support it, number 1. Number 2, we asked you to finish your ASN survey for hangars if you haven't done that. Number 3, we ask you if you're at an airport with a diagram, have a chat with your airport manager and say, hey, we'd love to bring our airport into the compliance with what's a brand new industry-led standardization effort to help GA pilots. And it costs them nothing. It takes about 15 minutes. And number 4 is we're asking you to stick around for a class photo here. The photographer just went to a press conference. He'll be right back, but we're going to be doing it out here after we're done with Q&A. We still have plenty of coffee and donuts. So class photo here, we'll be going out that door, and we're going to organize ourselves in a V. I would love to have all of the ASN shirts and hats in that picture today. So, okay, so let's open it up for some Q&A. We have Mark here. We've got some of the regulatory affairs staff. We can handle just about any question. And these guys can run around with the microphones if you have any. Yes, sir. Right here.
What's the suggestion or regulation on FBOs who have high prices on fuels and the airport being able to supply self-service that the FBO doesn't honor or doesn't have?
So the question was, FBOs with high fuel prices and the airport that doesn't provide the self-service area, but they can. The ugly answer is it's a free market. So if that's a demand signal, the market has to demand it, which starts with the pilots. And have a chat, a very friendly chat. You know, don't bring out the guns and arrows just yet, but have a chat with the airport manager and let them know there's a demand signal. It might require that you form your own LLC and ask to be a what's called a SASO, Specialized Aviation Service Organization. That's the compliance manual language for a small business at an airport. It's called a SASO, Specialized Aviation Service Organization, and they exist just for fuel pumps. Now, of course, you'll be competing with the FBO, so there may be some local politics involved, right? But once you have the plan for a SASO and you comply with the rules and standards at the airport, which is where all that's written, tells you exactly the requirements, get a little business entity together or maybe a fueler. But the challenge is going to be to get the airport to approve it, probably over the objection of the FBO. We support. Oh, absolutely, you have a right to ask for it. Sure, the pilots can all get together. I would suggest getting every pilot's signature on one well-worded letter and speak up, and then go to the town council or city council meetings and ask for that. But start with the airport manager, right? So it doesn't look and appear to be a mugging. And we always like to get along well with our dance partners, but it's the free market. I mean, I don't know a better way to answer that one. There's a way, and it's got to be per the airport compliance manual, rules and regs, but we've been successful in getting those in some places, and in other places the FBO has such a deep connection to the decision makers that they can deny it for any number of reasons. Another question over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, talking about the hangar shortage, the problem you described is exactly what I think we're dealing with at my airport, where there's a desire to build hangars, but the inability to get funding because of other priorities that you're required to spend money on first. Like, we had to replace a bunch of apron pavement that really probably didn't need replacing, but we had to do that before, we could get hangar funding. Do you think there's any ability, or have you given any thought to whether you might be able to lobby FAA to change their funding priorities, or the state governments that dole out the grant money to change those funding priorities? Because they're really just policy priorities within those organizations, and if we could get that changed so that local governments and airport sponsors could best determine their own spending priorities, it might be easier to allocate funding to build hangars and solve that problem.
The answer is yes. We are absolutely going to lobby in all those areas. State level, we're already doing that now. We're working with states, some very cooperatively, and others have to be convinced there's a problem. This data helps us. And there may be a national solution coming down. It's in the idea phase now. Like I say, the data's first. We want to be able to identify the true need, and there may be a national solution. I'd love to see, as a personal opinion, I'd love to see a pot of money identified just for GA hangars that doesn't have to comply with the AIP prioritizations because of this demand signal. Okay. Yep, there you go. Next question over here.
Hi, Mike. One of the issues in Western United States is there's an intermediate step between open tie down and hangar, which is the covered shelter. That wasn't part of the survey, and it seems like every high school in California has covered parking for the faculty with solar panels on the roof, and it would seem that solar roof shelters would be a great intermediate aircraft protection facility, and that ought to be easier to get funding. Has AOPA done any attempt at modeling that, or how to approach the local utilities to say, if we put this many shelters with this many square feet, how much funding could we get to give back to the airport manager and say, look, this is going to pay for itself in 3 years. Why not put some shelters up?
Great idea. And I don't recall this covered shelter being on our Pennsylvania survey. So we're going to add that before we launch the California survey and all the rest. That's a great idea. As part of the inventory of what's out there currently. I would probably refrain from telling the airport manager what kind of shelter to put up, because that's a local demand signal. It's a funding issue. There's a bunch of issues, as you know, go into that, John. By the way, John McGowan's our ASN at Reed Hillview, one of the biggest airports under threat. If you don't count Santa Monica anymore, he's in the middle. Yeah, he's getting choked. He is a phenomenal ASN, plugged in politically at the local level and the business level, and he's helping to basically take our fight to the streets. We've run out of options with the people in elected positions and appointed positions, so we're taking it to the streets, and they're doing a great job. They formed an outfit called CAPSO. And it's vibrant. It's a local support group, and it's with business and a PAC. That's right. I actually donated. So yeah. So they have a PAC too, which is important. So anyway, great work at Reed Hillview. I appreciate you being here. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dick Butler, the GOP down in Texas. I've been watching this hangar survey thing go on for nearly a year. I called my rep. We did ours. If you poll everybody in this room, I think you will find that the number one priority is hangars. It's hangars. It's all these other things too, but number one, it's hangars. I've been on a waiting list 9 years. 9 years. We lost 6 of the 20 hangars we had to a tornado on the 20th of May. There is no fix that we can see until somebody reprioritizes AIP. That is a doable thing. To me, the tool is your hangar survey. When you can go to the FAA and say, we've polled 92% of the hangars of the airports in the country, and this is what the issue is, this is the overwhelming issue, and here's how you fix it. We support you. It'll happen. I think it would help you get this thing finished if you would say, I called my rep and I said, hey, can I call other airports around me and do the survey for them? They don't have reps. He said, sure, go ahead. So I did 4 that are close to me. The average waiting list was 20 or 25 people long, and the average turn time was 3 years. So if all of us could do that, then...
So you're saying you went to the ASN survey and you did area airports in the local...
I did. I called my rep first, and he said, go ahead and get her done.
That's
then
awesome.
I went to those airports to rent a hangar and got a list and counted them.
Good for you. That's great. Yeah, I totally agree. The solution will be the next phase. Just to be clear, we're getting the data first. There's a lot of ideas out there. We happen to be lucky to work for Jim Kuhn, who's a master at how things work in D.C. If it's a D.C. fix involved, he's going to be pulling the strings, and we're already getting some good information out of this survey. So that's a great idea for the rest of you. If you have closer aboard airports, go do the survey at that airport. Just make sure you put that airport's identifier in the thing. Okay, let's start with this person here, and I'll give you my mic.
The issue we have now is a funding issue with the FAA. As of this, I believe this year they started, you have to have a 20-year master plan before you can proceed with any future projects. And the problem is the FAA, if you're lucky, you might get it back in 2 years. Chicago FSDO is not real excited about getting it back. And if, in our case, we have a couple of emergency areas where we have to purchase some land. We have to purchase some land because of intrusions on one of the end of the runways where we don't have a navigation easement. So it's been a struggle trying to get that project going. Fortunately, we did get the funding, but now we're done. We can't do anything until we get the 20-year master plan done. And our 5-year plan is up to date, but that's out the window. So I think the association ought to be looking at the FAA, you know, if you have a project and also have a limitation on how long you can leave that funding before it goes to another airport. So that's an issue.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating how long this process takes. The master plan comes first. Usually there's an airport layout plan, then it's funding. And the decision to do a hangar project starts about 6 years before you actually see ground getting broken. Or not 6, but it's a long time. Yeah, it's a long time. Yes, sir. Let's go to that, and then Doug. Montgomery Field and San Diego.
Yes. Yeah, Dave Gordon. Along with the funding issue for hangars, I think equally or maybe more important is, at least in California, is the bureaucracy to get anything approved. The cities and counties look at it as a money-making opportunity, and they don't have any. There's nothing specific for hangars, so you got your permits approved for building a hangar. They're going to treat it like it's a home, and I don't know, is there any effort being done to try to get the governments to help us build hangars? And the only ones who can build hangars are the super large FBOs, and so nothing at the local level or nothing at the normal person level can be done.
So I empathize with the political situation in California, especially as it flows down from state to the airport level. We have a great relationship with Amy Choi. Unfortunately, she's the state aviation director. Fortunately, she's leaving that post and going to work for the FAA. So she'll be an advocate for us when she gets to the FAA office in California. But the answer is yes, we're going to work on the national funding issue for hangars and the state level. I don't think we're going to have much luck in California. There's a lot of funny things happening with the aviation fund in California that may be funding other things. And we're aware of it, and we've made others aware of it, and we'll continue to work on that. But it's a challenge. I get it.
How about me, Josh?
Doug, and then right back to Doug. Go here. And we'll take 2 more questions after this and get ready for a photo.
Obviously, the long-term fix is to try and get funding from the FAA and all that stuff. A shorter-term fix that's had some success for hangars is if you go to a hangar contractor who builds hangars and you give them a business plan and you turn around and you say you lease the land, you build the hangar, you get the rent. And he puts up the money. Then you're not fighting the local government because they don't want to put up the money. And then he gets to build it, he gets his crew busy, and he gets the revenue. That's a much faster fix. Long term, you got to do it the other way. But the short term fix is go find whoever is in your local area who builds hangars and give him a business plan. He's got a guaranteed 100% occupancy if you got a long waiting list. It's a win-win.
Okay, just a comment about what Doug was saying. The airport managers that we surveyed in Pennsylvania would prefer to build the hangars themselves. If they have land, the faster, easier thing is to lease the land. Their money at the airport then becomes the lease rate, and the money from the rentals goes to the developer as it should be. In a perfect world, we would love to see the system get fixed to provide funding to those airports that can come up with a small match and want to build hangars, because as soon as they amortize the whatever debt they take on, which hopefully is smaller, that's a revenue stream for the airport. One of the survey things we found was at airports with hangars and fuel, 45% of the revenue comes from hangars and 45% comes from fuel. It's a major chunk of the gross revenue pie for airports. That revenue pie gives them the cash to then fund their 5% or 10% of future projects, as opposed to maybe a 30-year lease that goes off the field, and after 30 years it might revert to the airport manager. So you're right, it's a much better, quicker solution, and it's the free market doing it, so it's going to be done fast and proper. but we would prefer to do what the airport managers want, which is give them the funding. So we're going to take one more question, and then I'm going to actually, we had one back here first. All right, so we'll take that. That's the last question. We'll take you, sir.
Yeah, I have a hangar at a city-owned airport, and this is a little bit different question. Do you get involved? The hangar association is a pretty big hangar association, and I was told by that hangar association that the funding for one of our 3 runways that was closed because it needed resurfacing was there, but either the city manager or the city, which city-owned, did not get the paperwork in. Is that something you get involved in or not? Because, by the way, they still have the approaches going into that runway, but it's closed.
Yeah, we deal with that all the time. The best thing to do is go direct to your regional manager, and if it's not already an airport case we're working, we'll make it one. That's a great point. Let's take the last question here, then I'll make one more announcement, and we'll go outside for the photo. Yes, sir.
Rod Walker, Rocky Mountain Metro. It's good to see you, Mike. Thanks for being here. Josh, it's also good to see you guys. Obviously, we have a 6-year hangar wait at Rocky Mountain Metro, so, you know, I'm very cognizant of let's get some hangars built. But my question to you and the team is, I'm fighting a very big battle at Rocky Mountain Metro, as you're aware, and Josh has made you aware.
We are fighting a big battle. We.
I'm the one that's got the arrows in my back.
I know.
I got the arrows in my back, and my little guy here with me can attest to the profanity that gets yelled at in the kitchen table. But yes, it is a team effort. What 2 things that I'd like to ask you about is, number one, how do I better connect politically? And then I have heard nothing about AOPA Political Action Committee. Maybe that's because you probably can't speak about it because this is a non. But when I make my donations to the PAC, how does that affect me locally? And does it also help?
I'll take a stab at it, but Jim, I would love for you to jump in if you like. Any PAC donations go to our national PAC, and they help all GA pilots at a very critical nexus. We don't have a state PAC because we don't have 50 state PAC. We don't have the administrative capability to do that. We looked at it. It's one of our common refrains in legislative season is, what if we could create a PAC in this state to help push a couple of good GA bills? It's just too hard for us to do that. What we'd rather do is support and partner with existing PACs that are like-minded in the state level. So that's that question. And I appreciate what you're doing at Rocky Mountain Metro. As Josh was saying, it's a huge regional task force issue, as you know, so thank you for your work. So listen, I can tell there's a lot of energy and interest in hangars. So right back at you. Finish the hangar survey, please. And do what he did. If you find that there's no ASN at your local airport next door, fly over, do a $100 hamburger, and fill the survey out for that airport. We're tracking this by the 3-letter identifier, not by your name. So as long as there's a survey response for the airport, we'll take it. It's only 7 questions. I really like what you're doing here. That's great. So don't forget, the other ask was please call your U.S. congressman, U.S. senator, ask him to support the bill that's causing all this LOTA stuff. And please, I forgot to mention this earlier, but we have been doing ASN webinars. There's a lot of content on the ASN forum now. If you want to see some seminars on all these topics, the next one's on August 19th. You all have been getting the invitations. You're invited to sit in on it live. If you miss it, we put it on the website.